DOJ was actually investigating this, but as soon as Trump got into office, last I checked, he actually said, go ahead and throw away that case.
So it was a Department of Justice investigation, and he accepted the money from an undercover FBI agent in cash.
Are you aware as to whether or not we ever got that $50,000 back?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Are you aware as to whether or not this committee has decided to investigate that?
I'm not.
Are you aware as to whether or not any committee in Congress has decided to investigate the fact that we know that he took $50,000 from an undercover officer, and yet we still don't have that money, nor does he have any charges?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's get into it. We're living through the most corrupt presidential administration in American history.
Did a single question just expose a double standard no one wanted on the record? In a packed hearing, the answers came fast, but the implications hit harder. Accusations, silence, and a name tied to vanished taxpayer money, uninvestigated. While one community is painted as criminals, another story stays buried. And just as the trail gets dangerous, time runs out.
From Texas.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And for every witness that is here, thank you so much for your time and your attention. I just have one quick question. I have not been here the entire hearing, but I don't think this question has been posed for each of you, and we can start at the far end. Do you believe that all Somalis are engaged in fraud?
I do not, and I'd like to...
Okay, just yes or no. Next.
Of course not.
Oh, absolutely not. We have good Somali people in our state.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to make sure I level set, because it seems like we want to continue to, especially as we just heard those particular articles entered into the record, we want to continue to just make it seem as if you are Somali, then somehow you are a fraudster. And this administration has decided that it wants a target on their backs. And so when my colleague, Ms. Randall, decided that she wanted to talk about the threats that are being made towards various Somali people, the reason she brought it up is because this particular side of the aisle has a tendency of, if one person does something bad, especially if they are an immigrant, then we are going to cast aside that entire community. So I wanted to level set, and I appreciate your honesty, because that's something that we very rarely get from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. In fact, if we want to talk about fraud, I got a lot of fraud that we're going to talk about, because we're going to get into this, but I am very curious to hear. Let me ask you, Mr. Ballou. Are you aware of allegations that $50,000 in taxpayer dollars have been given to someone that is currently sitting in this administration by the name of Tom Homan? Are you aware? Okay, that's a yes.
I am.
Okay. And last I checked, and correct me if I'm wrong if you have different information, but he was given that $50,000 in exchange for being able to provide contracts and kickbacks to people. As soon as Trump was going to get into office, the DOJ was actually investigating this, but as soon as Trump got into office, last I checked, he actually said, go ahead and throw away that case.
So it was a Department of Justice investigation, and he accepted the money from an undercover FBI agent in cash.
Are you aware as to whether or not we ever got that $50,000 back?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Are you aware as to whether or not this committee has decided to investigate that?
I'm not.
Are you aware as to whether or not any committee in Congress has decided to investigate the fact that we know that he took $50,000 from an undercover officer, and yet we still don't have that money, nor does he have any charges?
I'm not.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's get into it. We're living through the most corrupt presidential administration in American history, a $300 million ballroom, a $230 million payout from the Department of Justice because the president got his feelings hurt because he had to be investigated for being a criminal. Hundreds of thousands of taxpayer dollars spent at Trump-owned properties around the country, Trump-branded wine being sold at the Coast Guard exchanges, American taxpayer dollars being spent on DHS propaganda ads on Truth Social, awarding federal contracts to corporations in exchange for campaign contributions. Kash Patel flew his girlfriend around the country on a multi-million-dollar jet that taxpayers paid for. Kristi Noem gave companies she's affiliated with hundreds of millions of tax dollars, then went out and spent another $200 million on 2 private jets for her travel. For 12 months, this administration has been taking billions of taxpayer dollars from American people and have been giving it away to their own companies in the form of tax cuts, government contracts, or other government funded subsidies. So Congress has a role in getting rid of fraud. I will admit that in any federally funded government program. However, I think the fraud that the American people are concerned about is that the Republicans are taking away Americans' health care so that ultra billionaires can get more tax cuts. The real fraud is the dehumanization and demonization of the working class Americans and immigrants to distract folks away from corporate socialism that's happening because of the Republicans. So this is truly the definition of throwing away the baby with the bathwater. The Republican philosophy is that if the cost of living for the average American increases, they're on their own. But if the cost of doing business increases for the wealthiest people on earth, well, then it's the government job to bail them out. But I want to get to my last question because, Mr. Ballou, I got to give you a chance. He's been issuing pardons for numerous people who have defrauded the American people. And Republicans on this committee, yeah, just as quiet as the room just got, right? So, Mr. Ballou, talk to me about how the Trump administration has welcomed fraud across government by purging DOJ attorneys and shuttering ethics office across the federal government.
Well, one of the things that's been a common theme in this discussion so far is potential government employee involvement in some of these schemes. That hasn't been proven yet, but it does seem to be alleged. The concern that I have is the office that would prosecute that in the Department of Justice, the Public Integrity Section, has been largely defunded and decimated.
Thank you so much. And my time has expired, but I do.
What unfolded in that hearing wasn't a viral soundbite. It wasn't a clash of personalities. It was a moment where a single question forced the room to confront something far bigger than policy. In less than a minute, a narrative that had been quietly building was put on trial, without raised voices, without theatrics. Just yes or no. And when the answers came back unanimous, the silence afterward told a louder story than the questions themselves. This matters now because it exposes how power decides who gets scrutinized and who gets shielded. Representative Jasmine Crockett entered the hearing without grandstanding. She thanked the witnesses. She acknowledged she hadn't been present for everything. Then she asked one question, deliberately narrow. Do you believe all Somalis are engaged in fraud? No speeches. No qualifiers. Just yes or no. The answers came quickly. Every witness said no. And that's when the real exchange began. Crockett wasn't asking to trap the witnesses. She was documenting something. Because moments earlier, articles had been entered into the record that leaned heavily on implication, suggesting that Somali identity itself had become shorthand for suspicion. Her point was simple but surgical. If the witnesses don't believe an entire community is fraudulent, why does the rhetoric keep treating them that way? Then the tone shifted. Crockett redirected the conversation, away from immigrants, away from stereotypes, and toward power. Specifically, allegations involving $50,000 in taxpayer money, an undercover FBI operation, and a senior figure connected to the administration. She asked if the witness was aware. He was. She asked if the money was ever recovered. He didn't know. She asked if any committee had investigated it. Again, no answer. That silence mattered. Here's what often gets missed. This exchange wasn't about proving guilt in real time. Congressional hearings rarely work that way. It was about contrast. On one side, entire communities scrutinized, generalized, and rhetorically linked to fraud, often without individualized evidence. On the other, specific allegations, named individuals, a defined dollar amount, an alleged DOJ investigation, and yet no follow-up. Ask yourself this. Why does suspicion expand when the subject is vulnerable, but contract when the subject is powerful? Crockett laid out a pattern, not as a theory, but as a series of examples. Taxpayer money flowing to Trump-owned properties, federal advertising dollars spent on partisan platforms, government contracts awarded alongside campaign contributions, ethics offices reduced, public integrity units weakened. Individually, each claim demands scrutiny. Collectively, they point to something larger. A system where enforcement appears selective. And when enforcement becomes selective, accountability stops being neutral. That's the tension the room couldn't resolve. This isn't abstract. When fraud is framed as something tied to identity, real people pay the price through increased surveillance, public suspicion, and political scapegoating. At the same time, when allegations involving high-level officials stall without investigation, trust erodes. The consequence is a credibility gap. Working Americans start asking why their benefits are scrutinized down to the dollar, while massive expenditures tied to power receive little public explanation. Immigrant communities hear one message: prove your innocence. Corporate and political elites hear another: wait it out. That imbalance doesn't just affect politics. It affects how laws are respected, how institutions are trusted, and how democracy feels on the ground. And once trust breaks, it's hard to rebuild. Realistically, nothing changes overnight. No charges were filed in that room. No investigations were launched on the spot. But moments like this don't disappear. They resurface in campaign ads, in oversight letters, in future hearings. They become reference points. The questions Crockett raised now exist in the official record. And that matters because records outlast headlines. If oversight committees choose to pursue these issues, they'll start there. If they don't, that choice becomes part of the story too. Either way, the contrast has been established. This hearing wasn't about noise. It was about priorities. Who gets the benefit of the doubt? Who gets investigated? And who gets ignored? Because the most revealing part wasn't what was said, it was what no one rushed to defend, explain, or deny. So here's the real question going forward. If fraud is the concern, why does accountability seem to depend on who you are instead of what you've done? Let me know what you think.